Dr. Power, guests have arrived.
Oh, thank you, Bonnie Castle. Hi, folks. Come on in. Have a seat. There's room for two over here. Well, I'm so glad you joined me today. This is the first of our Smoke Act sessions for our session. I hope you enjoy them. We'll have 8 of these, and they form the discussions that we'll have in class. Not the only things we're going to talk about, but some of the issues that we take out of the paper. And I have to take them. Today's a Wednesday prior to the course start on Monday, so we're a couple of days behind the actual, whatever the current status is of the stories we talk about. So build on them and add any other stories you'd like to talk about. The Smoke At Sessions is something that in Oxford, the Don, the prof, had chambers, sort of quarters, and you did readings there. You didn't so much sit in a classroom, but you'd come down, and the Don would have a small cluster like this of 6 or 7 people around, and through cigars and pipes and port and glasses of sherry, they would talk about issues like we're going to talk about today. And it's through the Socratic dialogue that we exchange ideas and challenge each other and test each other's hypotheses that we tend to get some firm terrain to stand on as through critical thinking and reflective thought, that I'm satisfied with my position. I can defend it. And in this course, that's all we ask you to do. There's no wrong or right answers. Just have some good, hard, reflective thought. And if you're satisfied that your view of the hand is the right view of the hand, then that's where I want you to stand. And it's the same on the exam. There'll be nothing I say to say that is the correct answer. As long as you can give me evidence-based support for your position, you've met the requirements of the course. I don't want you to be overwhelmed with the course. Those of you who had a chance to go in and do a quick scan of the vast array of materials in here, there's a lot. So go directly to the deliverables and see what you have to produce. Just that will get you your mark that you need to have a mark to go through the system. Anything else is bonus. And I had to design it that way. When Pedro came to me and said, Terry, can you take this from a face-to-face class to an online class and keep the standard, I felt quite challenged and frankly wasn't happy about it. I enjoy the face-to-face teaching and the Socratic dialogue and the interaction and the fast moving of a class environment, and it's hard to replicate that into a online situation. But having said that, not just personally me working on it, but really a collection of a wonderful bunch of people like Bonnie Castle that just announced your arrival, and others work hard every week to get these discussions to edit and to help me put in the course these rich materials. And I've done it deliberately in the sense that I've had a chance to scan your backgrounds, your bios, both cohorts, and it's interesting. We have such a vast array of folks who are very skilled in strategy, do it almost on a daily basis. Terms like goals, objectives, visions, strategic inflection points, that language, that lexicon will be well known to those folks. There are others of you that I sense this would be rather new, and there'll be a bit of a ramp-up curve to get to understand some of these terms and concepts and notions. And so what I've done is said to everybody, here's the basics in the deliverables, do that, that's all that you're required to do. But for those of you that are already well down the road and becoming strategic practitioners, I put a bonus section in there. And go in there and have a look. It's not required for the exam, but you find a whole bunch of rich things in there that may help you in your day-to-day job. For example, in the second session, I guess, we give you a little red toolbox with about 40 some odd tools in there that you'll use throughout the program, and many in this course. But for those in the bonus section, I put another 100 tools in there in another box. And more than you'll ever need in your lifetime. But for those interested in strategy and have a passion for it, like I have a passion for it, go in there and have a look around. But the bonus section you'll find rich with materials to look at your pleasure. But do a time appreciation. You need balance in your workplace, balance in your life. And as long as you do the deliverables, I'll be happy. Specifically on the deliverables for these discussion sites, I'd like to make the point that all I expect from you is 2 meaningful posts in a week. 2 meaningful posts in a week. That's not hi, how are you, but that's reflective thought, adding some value, some capital, intellectual capital to the class, and do that for us, and you've met the requirement. That's not to say a number, I've had it in the past, will do 30 or 40 posts in the week because they have a passion. They're enjoying the topic, they're enjoying the flow of the discussion, and I don't want to stifle that. I want you to do that. I want you to enjoy the course and get something out of it, and I'll work with you. But for those that say, look, I've got other things to do and my time is quite tight, just give me 2 meaningful posts on the discussion sites, and you've met the requirements. So that should be helpful in that regard. Critical correctness. I challenge you a little bit on this. I tend to poke the bear a little. There's no political correctness in this class, as long as we're respectful of each other. So we have Muslims in the class and we have Christians in the class, and if we can't have this clash of civilizations, if we can't have these conversations in an academic environment, in a respectful, fair and balanced way, where in the world are you going to have these discussions so you can truly understand? I mean, for example, if I held up my hand and asked you to describe what you see on this side of the hand, you'd probably say, well, an old arthritic hand of a 73-year-old with a ring on it. But if I turned it around here and asked you to describe it, I think you'd agree with me, you'd have to describe it a little bit differently. And so that's what we have to do in this class, is we have to come around from this side of the hand that we view the biases, the way we perceive the world, and come around to this side of the hand and try to stand on that terrain for a few minutes and view the world and get a sense of it. And we're going to do that a lot in this class. That's the only way to establish this critical thinking. And indeed, you may even wonder why in a strategy course are we looking at these emerging issues. And it's because we need to understand the water in the bathtub. If we don't understand the what's about to emerge through the fog and mitigate the damage or exploit the opportunities these changes are going to make in our strategy, in our businesses, and indeed in our lives, then we are not doing our job and what you're being paid for. And most of you are being paid for one thing at your work, and that's to be strategists, to help lead your company. And so we'll talk more about that as the course unfolds. I think I've covered all the points that I wanted to cover, other than say that I'm available to you. I'll work with you. I want you to have some time with your families, and I mean it sincerely. And this is not meant in my course to be a boot camp. It's meant to have some downtime on the weekends. But I accept there's a number of you working so hard during the week, you must do the work on the weekends to get through the course, and I accept that. But I'm saying to most people, I'll expect that it's Friday night. I don't expect to see you around on the weekends. I want you to spend some time with your families to do what you have to do, but get some downtime and join me again on Monday morning. For those of you that have to work on the weekends, because you can't get it done during the week, I'll be there, I'll be available to you and working with you on the weekends and doing some posts and answering some of your questions throughout the weekends. But as many of you as can, I do underscore the importance of you getting some downtime with your family, because it's putting great stress on the family and on your children, those that have them, and I want you to spend a little time with them. I'll be available to you anytime you want to call, 250, make a note, 250-472-3836, 472-3836 in Victoria. And I've got a better office at home than I have here on the campus, and so I tend to work on these online courses from my home for the next 8 or 9 weeks. And so most of the time you'll find me at that number unless I'm in at my office here doing meetings and other work. Well, folks, that completes the administrative detail, the boilerplate stuff that we need to know. I generally try to keep these to about 30-35 minutes in length. Today is unusually long because of the administrative details, so I ask for your patience on that. But I hope you have fun doing them anyway. I want to mention Sandy Walker. Sandy's agreed to help me out this time. We have 93 plus students in the two cohorts, and that is a very, very large number to try to do online by yourself. So the dean's been kind enough to give me a little bit of support. And so Sandy will be working alongside of us, primarily working on the assignments. So I'll be working with her, but she'll be responsible for marking assignments 1, 2, and 3. And I'll mark your final paper, your exams. I'll be marking your exams, and the participation grades and those sort of things are my area. And Sandy may drop in for a visit or two along the way just to say hello and maybe respond to a few questions. And she's got a lot to contribute, and I enjoy her very much working alongside of her. So with that, let's get underway if we can. First, I guess my opening comment, I want to talk for briefly, if I can, about biases, because we're looking at the newspapers and other articles and the media, and I think we'll all agree today that I don't think you can point to a media that does not demonstrate its bias, some far more than others, MSNBC and Fox News and CNN, and that distorts your sense of trust that we used to have, or at least I used to have in these sort of media sources, as giving me just the facts and allowing me to form my own opinion. So I encourage you, as we go through this, understand your biases. And your biases can generally be found in two clusters. You're either in the Plato camp, where it's for collectivism, it's Marxism, it's for socialism, it's one size fits all, it's for distribution of wealth. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the NDP party in this province. And if that's your biases and that's your belief, that's fine. There's no wrong or right answers in this class. On the other side of the continuum, there's the right-wing Aristotle view. It's the David Ricardo, Adam Smith, John Stuart Mills. No, John Stuart Mills was libertarian. It's the John Wayne. It's low taxes, get out of the way. I can take care of everything on myself. And we need to understand, if you only had two camps to fall into, which one is your bias, and then you have to make that accommodation. I talked about the view of the hand. In answering these questions on the discussion site, recognize your biases and try to make some accommodation, or at least listen to the thoughts on the other side of the hand that we've talked about. And I fess up right at the outset. I'm Aristotle by nature, hard wing, right wing, Attila the Hun. And so bear with me as I go through it. There are no wrong, right answers in this class. Don't pull back. As I say, just give me your best shot as we go through this, evidence-based as we do it. So with that in mind, the first thing I see here in today's globe is the UN report calls for urgent action on climate change. And it goes through the need for us to sign on board and get on board with this carbon tax credits and climate change, et cetera, et cetera. And I propose that, I think before we jump into that, recognize that there's only so many dollars to go around. And what I see this as, from my side of the hand, is this is a redistribution of wealth from the rich countries to the poor countries. China and India aren't bound by this agreement at this stage. They have a bit of a hiatus before they have to sign on. So they're asking us, you folks in Alberta, for example, on natural gas, shipping it to the States, you must charge 50 cents a unit more for natural gas. Well, it's a commodity. And Mexico is not part of that package right now, so we can send natural gas up. So if you're an American, which unit are you going to buy? The Canadian with the 50 cent added, or the Mexican model? And so the question becomes is that we have to be sure. There's no question. There's an ebb and flow and cycles to life and to this planet, and there has been ice ages and non-ice ages, and there's no question that man, and in a very small way Canada, and in a far larger way China, are contributing something to the CO2 levels, the rising tides, etc. We have to look at that. But can we really make a difference given the limited resources we have, and is it necessary that we make a difference? And so I want you to look at that. In fact, many talk about methane from cows is a far bigger problem than the people on the planet. You also look at this idea that if you dig deep, you'll find that the former Vice President, Al Gore, set up on the Chicago Option Exchange where all these tax credits go through. And so the sales of these things goes through his particular organization, and he's doing extremely well on this. And so there's a push from the globalist, if you will, and we'll talk a bit about that in a few minutes, to see that one size fits all, that the whole of the world adopts best actions for climate change. I'm not saying it's wrong or right, but I think it's one of the issues you have to discuss as strategists in your business and as the decision makers for Canada. I mean, it's not the old farts like me that move along. It's you folks that are going to be called upon to make this decision and give some direction to our directing minds in Ottawa as to what our stand should be. And right now we have Ford in the province of Ontario, the driving engine for Canada, along with Notley from Alberta, both putting their backs up and saying, stop, we can't afford this climate change right now. Bring the standards down. Let's get a little more reality into it. And so it's a topical issue that I think as strategists we should have some of the facts to deal with when you're encountered, when you're back in your places of work, to discuss what that might look like. So have a look at it. Brazil's got a presidential race running off down there. And again, the Brazil, and we've seen that with the Brexit in Britain and Trump in the States and a number of countries in Europe, there's this right-wing parties are emerging and moving closer and closer to power. And we have this playing out, the same sort of thing between nationalism and sovereignty versus globalism, one size fits all. In fact, with Margaret Thatcher in 1978, when she first brought in globalization this time round, and that was about 18 months prior to Ronald Reagan when he got elected in 1980, she started globalization with the thoughts of Hayek, an economist. And then Reagan came along and said, I like the same idea, and it was Milton Friedman from Chicago University he built his plan on. But the thoughts, the mindsets are the same thing. And it was like if you could picture the Earth as a pond, and what they were advocating, and we move towards, is the pond freezing over, little packets of ice, of NAFTA and Mercosur in South America, and the European Union over here, and Southeast, the ASEAN group all started to cluster, and we see these packets of ice forming. And the dream was all this ice finally would link together in one global community. And I think it was envisaged that in large part that's run by Brussels, which is a commission, and hence the rules and regulations and things kind of flow out of there. So people we don't elect kind of make decisions. So we get pushback from nations like Trump that says, if you don't mind, America first. And I'm unabashed to say, no problem, Canada first. And Britain stepped back and said, Britain first. And so that's playing out, and we should look at that. But Brazil's going through that exercise right now that they had Lula da Silva down there, ended up with 12 years in jail. And very quickly, Haddad came in behind him just recently to jump in. But the front runner right now, with just about close to the finish line, is an army captain who advocates very strident, and I'm not sure none of us would like him very much, farther to the right than Trump, and has some, even from my Attila the Right views, kind of distorted, but may end up running Brazil because the economy in South America, where Brazil is the engine of South America, as the European Union, Germany is, and as America is for the world, China for right up behind them, coming up that way. It's a concern what Brazil is doing. And we only have to go through Brazil and Venezuela and Ecuador and Argentina right now is the same thing. They're all having difficulties down there economic. The growth is slowing down and inflation's running away with it. So this week we can look a little bit maybe about nationalism, socialism, Brazil, because it makes a difference to us if there's a global setback in the global economy, or Brazil we have as a trading partner. What difference does it make to us as strategists in designing our strategies? And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. This is interesting. There was a very edgy meeting took place in China. I should report, I'm doing this on Tuesday, and you're seeing this now on Monday. So the news is almost a week old. Not much I can do. It's just the logistics of getting the video made up and edited and up on the site in time for you to have something to work with. And you're at liberty, of course, to add anything you want to add that's more current. But these will still, I'm sure, be relevant next week when we talk. But here's an edgy meeting between China and Pompeo, that it's just Beijing was very upset and insisted that they back up and apologize and get more in step with and not being quite so aggressive. And of course, the Americans and the Secretary of State are having none of that, and they closed the door and had a quiet conversation. And you can only imagine what took place between the parties. But we should understand that China is a heavy player, feeling its strength these days, and we need to spend a lot of time reflecting on this as strategists in just our business and what your relationship will be. Most of us think of outsourcing and having some role to play in China because of the wonderful opportunities over there. I mean, their middle class is larger than Canada and the U.S. put together. It's all pure middle class. It's been growing. But they're showing some fissures, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But we should understand the journey that China's been on, coming through the World War II and the Japanese invasion. 1949, the Great March ends, and Mao Zedong is left standing and going to Formosa, Taiwan, just off here with Chiang Kai-shek and the other army, and they were just fighting all the time and set up over here. So we have the two Chinas in 1949, and it stayed about that way under Mao Zedong through the three cultural revolutions. The one in 1966 was the big one, until they joined the World Trade Organization and became part of the World Trade Organization became part of the globalization in about 1979, and then things started to change for China. But up to that period, China declared it to be the period of humiliation. About 150 years, the Europeans came in and they just took parts of Macau and Hong Kong and just set up and said, we're going to control all this. And there wasn't much China could do about it. So they were quite humiliated by that. And China now is calling an end to that period. Because up to that point, for over 2,000 years, China was seen as the Middle Kingdom. It was called the Middle Kingdom. It was the center of the universe for the globe at that point, for civilization. Marco Polo went there, gunpowder went there. The breakthroughs were all in China. The silkworms, etc., were all found in there. And so it had much to offer. And China sees itself coming back into that center of the universe, that Middle Kingdom again that's starting to emerge, and it's feeling its oats. It's going into the East China Sea and the South China Sea. It's building on atolls. atolls, putting in what amount to be aircraft carriers on islands with bays and missiles and one thing or another, and is taking control, much to the chagrin of the neighbors of Vietnam and Japan and other countries, as they start to spread out. And their navy's growing like mad. They're up to 300 ships. They're not necessarily all of them are the same class as, say, the American ships, but nevertheless they're growing quickly. 300. The Americans have about 350, but they've got a blue water navy, and they're getting some strength in the area, and it's becoming a growing concern. But it's not just in the military side of it and the expansion into the area, but we play as Canadians, as Americans, as Westerners, we play chess, and we're thinking that's a pretty good game, strategic game to play. But the Chinese don't play chess; they play Go. And if you ever played chess, at the end of the game, when you look at the board, it's a complete annihilation. The winner is one that has 3 or 4 pieces left, and you completely captured the other side and the king, and there's very few pieces left on the board. Well, the Go one is how much territory can you capture without losing any armies. And that's what Sun Tzu advises. The best commanders is the one that doesn't lose any armies. And so they're strategically long-term players. And you only have to go, and we'll talk more in this class about the Silken Belt Road that's going all the way over to Europe to Spain and coming down and through some of Africa and back up. And China is loaning large gobs of money to these countries that desperately need this money to build ports and infrastructure and railways and stuff. But with that comes the strings about binding with silks and things, again, which Sun Tzu talks about, to keep your partners in alignment. It also gives them a chance to spread their language, their laws, and their military to secure the assets. And so in a long-term plan, it's happening. There's some pushback from Malaysian people are coming up and say, we can't afford your loan and pay it back, because they can see if I can't pay it back, they get a greater toehold in the country. And just look at Iceland and what happened there. I mean, another week we'll talk about that. There's so much to talk about. But anyway, we should start looking at China and its role and where it's going to fit in this. And for the first time in a long while, China is being talked to by Americans with the gloves off, saying, here's what we want for you. And they've got tariffs going back and forth and tariff wars. And the question is, who can last the longest at this point? And there's no question, economically, America is better off. But the tenacity of the Chinese might be concerning, that no matter what the cost, they may still hang on. And in which case, as we'll talk about in a moment, the whole global economy is at a tipping point. And we need Trump to stay where he is and for things to continue. If it was to show some sign of sputtering, all the other nations, I think, are already sputtering. We'd have a bit of a global recession. And that's important to you and I, and how our businesses are doing, and what sort of loans and things we'll have. So we're going to talk more about that, but certainly Nikki Haley, which today resigned, the ambassador to the UN, is a quintessential American politician on how she dealt with the UN over there and talked to them and gave them the straight goods, earned their trust, but got the message across that no longer was the old team in charge, but this is the way it was going to be. And to the credit, they've brought NATO together, and people are spending more in NATO, as Canada's now spending more in NATO, and they're contributing more to the cost of the UN. I think the Americans say they've saved over $1 billion so far on the cost of the UN. So we can talk a bit about the role of the Chinese and how you think we should be playing it. The Saudis, and again, just a symptom, but the Saudis and the Turks are having a bit of a bun fight over a journalist who went into the Saudis' embassy over there and didn't come out, and some rumor that he was murdered. By the time you hear this, we may have some answers actually what happened. But as of today's date, they're suggesting that murder took place, and they want some clarity as to exactly what happened. And the reason the journalist was picked up because he was on television a lot and quite vocal in the Saudis' actions on Yemen, which is just south of Saudi Arabia, and only a couple hundred miles away from Mecca. And it's got some fights going on. It's backed by Syria, but it's the Houthi rebels there, and are doing a remarkable job with very little, but they're beating the Saudis, who have American weapons and one thing or another, and doing quite well. And so it's a concern with the back of Iran behind the Houthis. So anyway, it's not just a symptom of where this individual went, but it's the play out And it's important to us as Canadians, is Turkey and Saudi are key pawns on the chessboard. It was Brzezinski wrote the Grand Chessboard and talked about every country, including Canada, where they should be moving in America's national security interests. And much of it still applies. But if you take Turkey, for example, it's the largest military force in NATO, a strong member of NATO. It sits at the key terrain on the Bosphorus. Very important. Americans drop planes in there with permission to go into the Middle East with some regularity. And yet we have the Saudis, who in 1953 agreed to bolster up when the Americans went off the gold standard in 1979. Corrected, about 1979 went off the gold standard. I lost track of that. I'm going to say it was 73. 1973 went off the gold standard in that zone. 173 went off the gold standard. The deal was, and they made arrangements with the Saudis, that they'd price their oil in American dollars. And in return for that, the Americans agreed to prop up the princes over there, no matter what direction they took, or human rights, or whatever they were doing. They were good to go because Americans would protect them. And so that they now find themselves, you've got the Turks over here and the Saudis over here, and both are key players in this chessboard that we need to observe. And so the question becomes what to do. And it's farther than that. The Saudis are Sunnis, and there's a clash of not just civilizations between Muslims and Christians over there. There's been a clash since the death of Muhammad around 642 as to who is the rightful leader of the Muslim faith, of the Islamic faith. And you have the Saudis and the Shia. And the Shia are very much the Iranians, and the Sunnis are very much bordered in Egypt and in Saudi Arabia, and they're clashing all the time between each other. And so it's not just the journalists, but there's a lot of stakes swirling around out here that we should watch. Imagine for a moment if Turkey's applied 4 times to become a member of the European Union. There are, under the Maastricht Treaty, there's 5 conditions you have to meet to join. They meet these conditions far better than many of the nations in there right now. There are basket cases. But yet every time they've been turned down, primarily, in my opinion, biased on the side of France, that they don't want Muslims in the country. And so they won't let them join. Again, no wrong or right answers in the class. You may find other reasons for that. But if we take the Turks who are facing westward and want to become part of the West and European Union, and we slapped them away, and we just took the missiles away from Turkey. Americans went in and took the nuclear weapons away from them, which was a slap in the face. And they turn around 180 degrees and face through the stands of Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan and Pakistan and right straight over to China. A Muslim crescent can develop, which could be quite powerful. And the leader could well be Turkey. So lots in there we could watch for, and we could talk a bit about that. More on climate change in this paper. I'll push by that. As I say, there's no wrong, right answers, folks. And add any stories you've got in there you want to discuss. Not a bad idea. Cryptocurrencies. Story here on Report on Business that in Vancouver, the largest cryptocurrency exchange has now got a bun fight going with CIBC. It can't get its money out of CIBC. They've gone to court over it, and it's locked up until the court decides who the rightful owners of this money happens to be. And this is one of the things about the Internet of Everything. And I call it everything, by the way, not the Internet of Things, because of recent data in my mind, everything is now connected. Where before it was more likely to be things, today it's you and I and cows. There's chips in everything, and I think it's a better descriptor. So you may find me referring to the Internet of Everything as opposed to the more restrictive Internet of Things. A small little point. We have this bun fight going on over there, but I think what we want to get out of this is a discussion about cryptocurrencies. And the bitcoins went over $2,000 and then dropped back down to $6,500. And is there a place for crypto money? Is there a place for bitcoins? Certainly, I think blockchain, we all agree there's an absolute place for, and it's going to be one of the major things we should all understand of what blockchain is and how it works. But what's your views on that currency? Certainly, you can see the dangers in it if digital currencies, and many European countries are going to digital currencies, and for some reason a bank decides it needs to close for a holiday or for 2 days or 3 days or some confusion, you can't get your money back. All these people have their funds tied up, millions of dollars, and can't get at it because the banks haven't decided what the right thing's going to be. And it may be a way to drive out the cryptocurrency private coins, because the public ones in Britain and also the States, they've now started cryptocurrencies that are controlled by the government. The government wants to know where your money's going, and these other ones didn't allow them to do that. And so in the States, for example, they have a list of approved banks that you can go to the approved bank and put your cash in and get credit for some cryptocurrencies, and then go back to this central clearing agency that will be the cryptocurrency place, and you can use it just like the bitcoins back and forth, but the banks this way have their finger in the pond to see it. Why would you want to use it? Well, many reasons, but one is the exchange rates. Every time you go for a trip to Disneyland, you take your Canadian dollars in and you get your American dollars and come back and change your dollars back again, and every time the bank gets a piece of the action just for in and out of currencies. And they lose all that if this other thing happens. The restriction of taking $10,000 out of the country is foregone because it's easy to take your bitcoins and they're quite mobile as you move. And so it flies in the face of government control. Want to know what you do with your money. So we could discuss that. It may not, is it your money? Outlet malls are collapsing. There was a retail building boom. There's 16 factory outlet malls in Canada, and my wife loves them. And so, but all of a sudden they're slowing down. Part of this Internet of Everything again and retail sales. And we're going to talk a bit about that. But one of the first things I've asked you to do is to very quickly look at about an hour video I've got up there for you. I did it about 4 years ago on the Internet of Everything. But it gives you a sense of almost every business, every sector, your business, your sector, what you're looking at, what's happening. It'll also talk to you about, we'll talk a bit today about, where the job's going to be in this new world, because it's a brand new industrial age. It's a zero-based marginal cost economy. It's the cost of this paper. Those familiar with economics will understand there comes a marginal cost curve, goes down and to the right, and at a certain point it bellies out, and then all of a sudden you lose those efficiencies, and the cost per unit comes up. A hamburger place built to take 100 hamburgers an hour does quite well. A bus comes in with another 100 people, and all of a sudden the people are stumbling over each other and producing a hamburger. The production costs go up. Well, now with this Internet of Everything, the cost of food, of medical services, of law services, of banking services, of newspapers, all drop down to a marginal rate of approximately zero. Once you can build it in, the cost is close to zero. Imagine for a moment as a lawyer, and I happen to have a law degree, and I did some consulting about 2 years ago for a law firm in Vancouver, guiding them along this path, that if this artificial intelligence like IBM Watson and Google's working on this, is it Alexis? There's a number of them out there that are robots that set this up. And once you put the money in, and you have a motor vehicle accident, you come to me. The current model is I get out my yellow pad, I listen to you, I ask you some case questions. I've had a good night the night before. I may even forget to ask you the right type of questions. I get my notes together. I then go to the library, pull some books off the shelf, look for recent decisions, and not all of them, as many as I think are warranted, write up what I think given those facts, those circumstances, what the damages should be, what the awards could be, and then call you back in for another meeting and have a look at it. Under this other order, in fact, the new model was to outsource it. In the middle of the night, send this off to India. We're based on the same sort of legal system. And while we're sleeping, they can do the research at a budget price in their library and send me back a report online the next day. And so I can move much faster and cheaper by outsourcing some of that research. But today, imagine for a moment that I have a robot that I've taken time to give them every possible question. And robots train themselves. Like I've been using it for about 18 years, something called Dragon Voice, voice recognition. And every night it builds itself. It gets better and better and better and more accurate and asks me questions. The same with these models. So you'll end up with a machine that now when you have an accident, you come in and you talk to the machine. And the machine will ask you all the questions and record it just that quickly. And then say, sit there for a second, and in the whir of a spin of a couple of seconds, out prints a complete report looking at every jurisdiction, looking at every case, selecting the absolute best cases and the best damages based on the closest to this set of facts. And now as a lawyer, I come in, pull that up, and say, based on this, I think your case is $5,000 for whiplash, whatever is the case we're going to get in this thing. That's amazing. We don't need all that research, less lawyers required, and it's a far better product, and the cost of legal services come down. It's true for every business, every sector, whether it be medicine, operations, nursing, pharmacists counting pills. About 80% of what we do can all be replicated by machines. And so anyway, I got me off the track there. I think I was talking about the retail and e-commerce and what's going on with the with Target and Sears and these sort of stores and retail centers. They're all collapsing and becoming different. And so you have to find that sizzle, that bundling of something in your business that makes it it makes it a bit of an experience, and find some way to add. Like, you don't just sell hot dogs anymore. You sell hot dogs and buns, and then you sell mustard, and you have to get that synergy going between some of your, not necessarily competitors, but people who are kind of co-op in the same sort of field that you're in. You look at those. So we could talk a bit about the impact on the retail business, Internet of Things. Look at that video. There's lots in there to discuss. The Google, Alphabet, all have troubles. The tech companies, of which there are four major ones and subsets, I affectionately call them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Bright, shiny things. We all like those sort of things. This new one they've got now is this new little, I forget what it's called, but it's much like a Facebook. You've got an opportunity, or Skype, to have a little machine here, and grandmother can talk to the machine. But what you have to realize is that machine has the ability to watch you, not just stay in the one thing, but to hear everything in this sort of room, and to visually have a look around. And it's all being recorded and analoged and taking into the system, and then they sell it, and it's quite dangerous. So you need to cover all this up. You need to disconnect it. And so one of the things we have to look at is we all want this new industrial age, the low-cost products, this sort of thing. But we have to understand the dangers of stepping through that looking glass. The idea of the data security and data privacy and data sovereignty and data censorship. This side of the election. No question, Google and Facebook are going to influence this next election in the States coming up in about 28, 29 days. It's going to influence those elections dramatically on what they post in Google and what you search and what pops up top, what doesn't pop up. And I think there's a growing appetite to have a hard look at these, like Standard Oil and Bell, that got broken up in years past. When something gets so strong, it almost becomes a monopoly and is dangerous for the public good. And more so in the Europeans. They tend to be asking out large fines to these people when they breach security and break-ins. So we want to look at the dark side of the internet a little bit and some of the dangers of accepting these bright, shiny things. Businesses take an active role in planning for automation. Again, we're going to talk about that in this class. Big article in here. This one's got a little picture of a robot police going up and down the malls, things. But the World Economic Forum, just chief human resource officers, put out a new publication based on 20 developed countries coming together and putting their best thoughts on a piece of paper for us. And they said that the workforce by 2022, 3 years' time, that it would be 40% were looking for expansion and 60% were looking for a contraction in the number of people working. They're also saying that the type of people they're going to apply is going to be a shift to be more contractors, more flexible arrangements, more remote staffing, drawing from workers from far-flung locations, less sort of full-time, but more piecemeal, as called. You'll be called in to do the work coming up. They're saying that robotics of the companies that were surveyed right now, 71% of the tasked hours, things that they have to do, task billable hours, 71% of those are done by humans, while 29% currently are done by machines. We use computers to do some of the typing and reprinting and things of that nature. Again, by 2022, in 3 years' time, they say that's going to change from 29% done by machines to 58% done by humans and 42% done by machines. And so what we see happening here is this gap between the rich and the poor. We see more and more people, truck drivers. There's 250,000 truck drivers in Canada. We now have Suncor Industries in Alberta now have these mammoth trucks. They're in the I talk about it in the course, that do the driving 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and they don't have to pay $100,000 a year for drivers to do this sort of work. It's doing it for them. Drone trucks are having it. And imagine drone trucks just out in front of us, Mercedes-Benz, 5 years, maybe 10, but closer to 5, I suspect. Drone trucks are operating, coming to a black warehouse. Black warehouse means there's no lights, no heat, whatever, just robotics working in the dark. They don't need lights, don't need heat, doing it. Pallets, pick them up, take them, put them on the back of a drone truck, take it down to the local port in Vancouver. Drone ships, Sweden now has them. Drone trucks loaded up. Drone ships take it across the pond, unload on the other side. McDonald's have 1 or 2 people. The rest are drones serving French fries. It's happening, folks. And then the question becomes for us, what are all these people going to do? In your industry, what are you going to do? And that's 2022 is just out in front of us. It's going to be a major problem for you as strategists and for your business and your HR departments. What are you going to do with all these people? You need to be thinking about it yesterday. Our government needs to be thinking about it yesterday. And where are those jobs going to be? And in this course, we'll identify some of those jobs, and some of the PowerPoints I've given you is where we have to transition and move towards, because those can't be replaced. Currently thinking about computers taking over. But even artificial intelligence and the growth of it, there'll be encroachment even on that remaining 20%. And then tied in with that, interesting enough, something we talked about in earlier classes, is a guaranteed annual income. And here it talks about a guaranteed income. They say in Ontario they recently tried a basic income pilot project, but it failed. But it failed because they didn't do it properly. There were no offsets. It was simply, let's try a guaranteed annual income for a cluster of folks and see how it worked. And yes, it cost more, but they didn't cancel anything. And they've actually given some numbers in here. The Parliamentary Budget Office estimated that net cost in Canada for a basic income model based on the Ontario model would be $44 billion annually. $44 billion annually. Keep in mind, we send, for example, $7 billion each and every year under the Indian Act for First Nations. I just grabbed that as one of the numbers, but $7 billion. So $44 billion is not necessarily a large number in a but $1.7, $1.8 trillion economy. But anyway, $77 billion is what they say what we need to make it happen. And then they go on and give some further numbers in there. They say $20 billion of that is the provinces spend collectively on income assistance and disability support. So we're already paying part of that out, $20 billion of the 44. And they said a little further on, they go on to say that $24 billion is what we put on child care benefits. So imagine for a moment, if we can, I think the figure's higher. I think we need $100 billion, but that's my model. But imagine for a moment a guaranteed annual income for these people that were stepping over on the streets, who have closed the mental health clinics and things like that. So the number is growing exponentially, and it's going to really grow as we're stepping into this brave new world, this new industrial age. Every man, woman, and child gets $1,000. In your family of 4, you get $4,000 a year, $4,000 a month coming in. And that'll be clawed back in tax. If you're making good money, you're going to pay tax on it. If you're not, the first $30,000 you'll be allowed to keep. Everybody gets it. People sleeping on the streets. But we closed down all the social assistance. We closed down student loans. We closed down old age pensions. We closed down welfare supports at all different natures. We closed down those offices. We let all those government employees go. The Ontario model would have worked had they taken that other side of the ledger, and the number I just pulled is 1,000, but it could be any number you wanted to make. And if you're making good money, as I'm making, you're making good money, then we pay tax on that. It gets clawed back. But the people that are laying on the streets, getting $1,000 a month in Victoria may not necessarily get them everything they need, but it'll get them off out the street and into some shared room somewhere, better than what we have now. Well, I'm getting concerned about the time. I have so much to talk to you about today, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I think what I'm going to do is close it there. I love this stuff. I had the Post and the Victoria paper too to go through. So let's start with that, folks. There's enough there to get your teeth into and to enjoy. Take any topics you want. There's no wrong or right answers. Anything you want to put up there is fine. Let's just have a discussion. 2 meaningful posts. I know you'll enjoy it, and there's so much to talk about. Take care now. Bye-bye.